Carson Valley Garden and Ranch. And my name is Gisele Schoniger, and I work for Kellogg Garden Products. We've been in the business for about 83 years. And I was starting to tell you that this is just a nice story about Janice Kellogg. She's the matriarch of the company, and Star Roses named a rose after her, which, as you can imagine, that is a huge honor. And most people, that happens after they're gone. So we are so excited for her in our industry that she was able to have this rose named after her. It's called the Janice Kellogg Rose. I'll pass these back. And it's a grandiflora, very fragrant, just a really beautiful, beautiful rose. So we're really excited about that. And I'm really thankful to be here today. And did everybody get a gardening guide? Okay, I think you all did. So my background is actually with the use of chemicals. I went to school at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, which is a production agricultural school. So everything we learned about was about production ag, which meant that whether you were in greenhouse crops, the landscape industry, or whether it was livestock, it was about fattening up the crop as quickly as possible, harvesting it, getting it out to market, and getting the next crop in the ground or the next batch of livestock in the corral. And when we look back in our industry, most of the synthetics that we've been using today, the pesticides and the herbicides and all the different types of fertilizers, most of those were developed right around World War II. So in the mid-40s is when the biggest push of using chemical fertilizers was created. And we all remember hearing the term better living through chemistry. And in the 40s and all the way up until maybe about the 60s, that type of practice was acceptable. We were able to grow crops in a very short amount of time, get a very large yield, get it out to market, get the next crop in the ground, and it was this cycle that we kept. Our whole focus was everything above ground. It was all about chemically oriented gardening. And today we're now more on a biological approach. We're more interested in what's happening below the soil system. Instead of forcing plants to grow, we're more interested in allowing plants to grow at their natural rate, but just enhancing the overall plant performance. So when you go from about the 40s to the 60s, after about 20 years of the practice of using high NPK fertilizers, what we started to realize was we were literally killing all the biological life in the soil. We were frying out all the living organisms in the soil, which makes the soil healthy. And we had to use 2 to 3 times the amount of fertilizers to try to get the yield that we were getting in previous years. And it just wasn't working anymore. So I graduated from Cal Poly in '87. And of course, it took about 2 or 3 years after that before we started hearing about the term sustainability. I mean, certain people were talking about that in the 40s. Rodale was one of them. He was way ahead of his time, but people really didn't give him much credence. Today, this is now mainstream. Everybody cares more about what we're putting into our bodies, what we're feeding our kids, what we're doing to the earth. It used to be that if you were an environmentalist, that was sort of a political statement. Today, it's not. Today, it's really that people really care about the products that they're using. So there's been a big shift, and when I started selling organic fertilizers and teaching people about it about 15 years ago, there was a pushback from the industry. They really didn't understand the concept. Now, the image of an organic gardener all the way into 1995 was that we were a bunch of Birkenstock wearing, tie-dye wearing, granola eating hippies. And of course, there was a grassroots group of people in the 60s and 70s that were already talking about the issues that we're now hearing about every day. Global warming, all these terms, being sustainable, caring more about what we're doing to the environment. It just took us all this long to really get that message, I think, is really what's happened. And of course, 15 years ago, when you went into a nursery, the organic fertilizers that you would see would be blood meal, bone meal, and cottonseed meal. They were in the back corner of the nursery collecting dust, and what you would see is 10 to 15 feet of chemical fertilizers. Well, today it's the opposite. Today we're seeing the chemical set shrink and the organic set continue to grow. So really this is an important time and a fun time to be in this industry and to be a gardener, because we have all these great products that work with Mother Nature instead of trying to dominate her. So I could actually wrap up my whole conversation in a couple of concepts. When we look at using synthetic fertilizers, now let me talk to you about the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium on a box of fertilizer. when we look at these three numbers, when I started talking about organics 15 years ago, people would look at these three numbers. So we have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. On the chemical chart, it's N, P, and K, right? An easy way to remember these three numbers is up and down, all around. The first number, nitrogen. Everything above ground, all the vegetative growth, all the leaves, tissues, and stems of the plant. Now, this one lady said to me, shouldn't it be up, down, up, all around? Whatever works for you. It's just easy to remember this way. Up, and down, all around. The middle number is for both ends of the plant. Root development, that's where a plant's going to first establish itself, roots. Later, flowers, fruit, seed production. The third number is all around. Roots, flowers, fruit, seed production, all around disease resistance and drought tolerance. When I started selling these products, people would look at these low numbers and say, oh, please, give me a triple 20, or at least a triple 16. That was just the mindset that we were in. It's so interesting that from the 40s until the mid-90s, if you really think about the way that we gardened, we didn't think twice about going to a garden center and picking a chemical off the shelf, whether it was to feed our plants, whether it was to kill insects, to kill weeds, to kill disease problems. We didn't really think twice about it. Now, this isn't everybody, but the majority of us, we had swung so far out from center that it was normal for us to pick a chemical. Today, what this is about is not about making everybody 100% natural and organic gardener, because that's really a lifestyle. That's looking deeper than just in the gardening products you're using. It's about a whole lifestyle. But it's about moving us back to center, to using products that work with nature instead of try to control nature. So the fertilizers that we've been used to using, the high NPK fertilizers, the 20-20-20s of the world, or a lot of the lawn fertilizers. When you look at a lot of lawn fertilizers today, the nitrogen content is 28 and 32. Well, you have to mow that lawn before you get the product down on the ground practically. What that produces is a plant that has a thin cell membrane. Another way of saying it is a thin cell wall development. That translates into a plant that has a thin leaf surface. When you have a plant with a thin leaf surface, insects, just say like aphids. Aphids are piercing, sucking insects. They land on the foliage, they pierce through the foliage, and then they suck the juices out of it, okay? When you have a plant with a thin leaf surface, you're going to have a lot more damage, whether it's insect damage, wind damage, disease problems, drought problems. But what we liked is the fact with these high NPK fertilizers was that we had quick growth. We could see something happening in the garden very quickly. But what we didn't realize was we were producing a plant that really wasn't at its optimal. So when you look at these numbers, and the numbers are low, don't let that fool you into thinking that it's not going to be effective. All chemical fertilizers focus on feeding the plant, but they do nothing beneficial for the soil, and that was the shortcoming that we had. Now, if you buffer the chemicals by using compost and using a lot of organic matter or mulches in the garden, the mulch acts like a buffer and will literally absorb some of the toxic portions of the chemical fertilizers. But a lot of people aren't doing that. How many of you are mulching? Would you say is part of your gardening practice? Okay, that's terrific. More and more of us are starting to realize that's probably, other than the use of using organic fertilizers, that's probably one of the most important things we can do in the garden, is adding a thin layer of mulch over the top of the soil. A mulch would be anything that you're laying on top of the soil. I tend to like using composted material because as the composted material breaks down, it becomes part of the soil again. Okay? So using an organic natural fertilizer produces a plant with a thick cell membrane or a thick cell wall or a thick leaf surface. You might still get that same aphid in the garden landing on that foliage, but it will not penetrate through that leaf surface as easily. That's a big difference between using chemicals versus using the naturals. Okay? So let me come back to some of these and share with you what makes up the Dr. Earth products. When you look at the term on here, we have a term on here that's called probiotic. Have any of you seen that in health food stores yet? So we all know what antibiotics are, right? When we take an antibiotic, we hope it's going to kill whatever's making us sick. But we also know that it kills all the beneficial microflora in our system. So what do they tell us to eat? Yogurt, to get the Lactobacillus acidophilus back in our system, right? Now, Lactobacillus acidophilus is just one of the bacteria, one of the live cultures that we need in our system. We need these live cultures in our system to break down food efficiently so that we can get the nutrients out of the food efficiently and just so our system works more effectively. Believe it or not, in the soil system, it is the same practice. If you look at the back of any of our packages, you will see on one side it lists all of the beneficial soil microbes, The top 6 are bacteria and the bottom one is a fungus. Well, believe it or not, Lactobacillus acidophilus is one of the bacteria that we put into the fertilizer. So what do these microorganisms do? When you think of the soil system, it's a living, breathing entity. But we didn't really think about that for our soils until about the last 20, 25 years. Again, our focus was predominantly, what can we get out of the soil? Today the focus is, how can we build the soil? How can we focus on what's underneath the soil? It's more of a biological approach, allowing us to feed all the living organisms in the soil. They, in turn, break down the organic matter, whether it's fertilizer or whether it's compost. They break down the nutrients in the organic matter, and the plant takes the nutrients when it needs it, instead of being force-fed, which is what the chemicals are doing. Do you know what one of the number one issues that we are faced with today in the landscape industry and in homeowners and with golf courses? It's runoff issues. Our products, the Dr. Earth products, are one of the number one selling fertilizers around Lake Tahoe, or specifically our lawn fertilizer, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it's the phosphates that have been polluting the lake and creating all the algae bloom. Well, this is a 935 NPK. It's a homogenized pellet. It takes all the microorganisms to break it down. So it's not like a chemical where when you water it, the chemical dissolves, it goes through the soil system, the plant takes what it needs, and the rest of it leaches through the soil system and goes basically either into the rivers or into the lakes or just down, into the streams. So what we found with using the organic fertilizers, they are not a quick release. They're more considered, a lot of people use the term slow release fertilizers. They're really not. It just takes a little bit longer for the microbes to break them down. So chemical fertilizer will activate, let's say in 5 to 7 days. You're going to see something. You're going to see a plant perk up, green up a little bit. You might even see it starting to grow a little bit. So on this end of the spectrum, we have speed. It's all about plant growth, but nothing beneficial for the soil. The old-fashioned organic fertilizers, like I helped build this brand. I was the first person hired in the state of California to focus on the Whitney Farms brand, which was an Oregon-based company, and now Scott's Ortho Miracle Grow bought this brand. So a lot of the big chemical companies, a lot of the big fertilizer companies in our industry are buying up some of the smaller mom-and-pop companies. But this product, when I worked for Whitney Farms, we didn't have any beneficial bacteria in it or fungus. So what happened is, on this end is speed with chemicals. On this end, it took 2 months for the fertilizers to work. But it had all these great benefits for the soil. So the organic community, people that really got this whole technology, they were willing to wait. Most of us, we want to see something happen now. So by adding these beneficial microorganisms into the fertilizer, now we're looking at, instead of 5 to 7 days or 2 months, we're now looking at 10 to 14 days. Plus all the benefits of what the microorganisms do in the soil. So the first function is they secrete enzymes to break the fertilizer down so the plant takes the nutrients when they need it. Now, I just told you about antibiotic and probiotic. The term probiotic means to encourage life. Of course, antibiotics means to discourage life, to kill life off. Well, having just said that, are any of you familiar with BT, Bacillus thuringiensis? That's a bacteria that you spray on the foliage of plants, and it controls the caterpillar stage. A lot of people use it on their tomatoes to control the tomato hornworm. And it is a bacteria. Well, Bacillus is a very large genus, and there are 3 different species that we actually put into this one. We have 3 species of Bacillus. The second one is called Bacillus cereus. It's Cereus, and it produces penicillinase. Now, what's penicillin? an antibiotic, right? So penicillinase is also an antibiotic. You might say, wait a minute, you just said antibiotics kill things? Welcome. Why would I want that in a fertilizer? It only has an effect on disease-causing pathogens found in the root zone of plants. Now we're talking about more than just feeding plants. We're talking about having the ability to have natural living organisms that will help suppress disease. That's pretty important. So essentially what this young man did is he mimicked Mother Nature. He discovered what he called the 7 champion strains of beneficial microorganisms, and he put them into the fertilizer. Now every organic fertilizer company that's in the market today is mimicking what he's done. He has literally set the bar now of what is acceptable, of what should be the starting point of an organic fertilizer. When I left Whitney Farms, 6 months later, they were then adding microbes into their fertilizer as well. So the technology today, people are willing to wait 7 to 10 days to have results because they know they're going to have better plant performance. Let's see, what do I want to share with you next? Now, the starter fertilizer, I didn't get the Sure Start, but that's okay. I'll start with this one. Now, just what's in these products, let me just read what's in here so that you can get an idea. We put fish bone meal, feather meal, potassium sulfate, alfalfa meal, kelp meal, and seaweed extract, plus all the beneficial microorganisms, plus mycorrhizal fungi. How many of you have heard the term mycorrhiza? Anybody? Okay, great. So it's been on the planet for about 460 million years, and we've been paying attention to it for about 25 years. The word, I want to say it to you so that you can speak powerfully about it, and then I'll show you this picture. The root of the word mycor, M-Y-C-O-R, means fungus, and rhiza, R-H-I-Z-A-E, means root. So it literally translates into fungus root. And it's been on the planet for 460 million years, and 90% of all plants on the planet form a symbiotic relationship with mycorrhizal fungi. Okay? So there's many different species. There's endomycorrhiza. Endos is the Greek word for inside. So if this is my root system, endomycorrhiza, the spores germinate inside the root wall. They come out of the root wall and they colonize the whole root system as if it's a knitted stocking. Okay? And they fan out into the soil. The term endos, again, is inside. So endomycorrhiza means inside fungus root. It's a very ancient species of mycorrhiza. It forms an association with herbaceous plants, with all the food that we eat. Almost all the food that we eat forms an association with mycorrhiza, with the exception of broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts. And there's maybe a couple of other things. But everything else forms an association. Then there is ectomycorrhiza. Ectos is the Greek word for outside. So ectomycorrhiza means outside fungus root. If this is my root system, ectomycorrhiza comes into contact with the outside of the root wall, colonizes the whole root system, and it fans out into the soil. These fans are called mycelial fans or fungal fans. If my root system typically would go to here, what happens is the mycorrhizal fungi would attach to my root system and then fan out into the soil and make the surface area of my root system anywhere from 10 to 100 up to 1,000 times larger than its original root system. And these mycelial fans or hyphae travel through the soil and they release these powerful enzymes that assist, that make it possible to unlock nutrients that are abundant in the soil but that the plant roots can't utilize by themselves. So think of mycorrhiza as a translocator of nutrients and water. And here's a great picture that describes that. So these are 3 little pine seedlings. This orange part is actually the root system. Everything else that looks like roots is the mycorrhizal fungi. It's really incredible if you think about the fact that you have plants have the ability to have this fungal attachment that actually assists them in surviving on the planet. I mean, that's essentially what they were really developed for, was to assist plants to survive. Now, the plant itself, the root system secretes what we call an exudate. which becomes a food source for the mycorrhiza. The only way the mycorrhiza will survive is because the root itself is secreting this food source. That is the ticket to a smorgasbord. And the fungus says, I'm going to attach myself because I know I can be fed. The plant photosynthesizes. It creates its own carbohydrates, right? Its own sugars. So it's able to feed itself. But in order to get the nutrients that are locked up in the soil, it requires the mycorrhiza. So what happens is these mycelial fans travel through the soil. They secrete these enzymes that unlock nutrients like phosphorus, which is typically bound by the soil, iron, which is typically bound by the soil, calcium, zinc. All of these nutrients, it captures them, translocates them back to the root of the plant. The plant says, thank you very much. I was low on those nutrients. I needed that extra boost, and now let me feed you. So that's the symbiotic relationship. The fungus feeds the plant feeds the fungus. So the first thing you get with mycorrhiza, better nutrient uptake. The second thing you're going to get, because you have a larger root system, is more access to water. So these are all things that really, if you think about using these products in your garden, you're really giving your plant the opportunity to get the best root development. When a plant has the best root development possible, everything above ground is going to be better. Anytime you plant anything in the ground, you want to get these bacteria and fungi right at the root zone, right where they're going to do their best work. Now, another byproduct of, I'll pass this around so you can take a look at it. It's really fascinating. Another byproduct of the microorganisms and the mycorrhizal fungi are these glues that are produced. One of them is called a mucigel. It's a gel-like substance which is sticky. And it literally takes mineral particles of soil, sand, silt, clay, organic matter, or compost, and it binds them together to give you a semi-stable soil aggregate. In other words, it creates good soil structure. One of the glues that is a byproduct of mycorrhizal fungi is called glomalin. And that was just discovered in 1995. So a lot of the technology that we're learning about today, this is we're just at that tipping point now, where we're going to start seeing even more things come into the market that are going to be tools in the toolbox that we can use. I look at Dr. Earth as a product that is a tool that should be in every gardener's toolbox that allows the plant to get the best possible start when you're planting something, whether it's in the ground or in a container. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk to you about a few other products. Some cottonseed meal. This is typically an acidifying fertilizer. You'll find this in our Azalea Camellia rhodi fertilizer for anything acid-loving. Azaleas, camellias, rhodis, hydrangeas, blueberries, evergreens, bonsai. Cottonseed meal is very good for bonsai. So is our Azalea Camellia rhodi. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of other products, and then I'll go into some of the soils. Now, how many of you have used alfalfa meal before? Okay, so alfalfa, which is grown here extensively, right? Now, this is a different company, Grow More. Our alfalfa meal is a 212 NPK. This one's just a 200, so this one's primarily just going to be nitrogen, right? And most people would look at that number and think, oh my gosh, what is that going to do for my plant? The numbers are so low. Don't let that fool you. Alfalfa is a grass, and it's dehydrated, right? It's not a grass. What is it?
It's a broadleaf plant.
It's a broadleaf plant. Okay, thank you for correcting me on that. So it's a plant. It's a broadleaf plant.
But it isn't a grass.
And it's dehydrated, right, and pulverized. So we pulverize it and put it into this form. Now, do you know what the growth stimulant is called in the alfalfa? Have you ever heard of it? Now, I'm a student just like you sitting there. So see, I just got to learn something too. So when you mix alfalfa meal into the soil, it is like a salad bar for the microorganisms. It's very easy to break down. So they feed on it, they break it down, and it releases a growth stimulant called triaconitol. That growth stimulant gives all plants a gentle burst of growth. A lot of Rose Society folks, if you see a fertilizer recipe for roses, you will see alfalfa meal in it. Okay? But it is not just for roses. This is in every blended fertilizer that we make, and it's almost in all of the soils that we make as well. So don't let this fool you that just because the numbers are low that it's not effective. That's really not true. Now another one that we have in Grow More, and this one is 001.5. Now ours is 0.5, 0.6, 2.5, so it's a little bit richer in potassium as well. Now anything that comes from the ocean, whether it's fish meal, fish bone meal, seaweed extract, or kelp meal, is going to be rich in trace elements. Trace elements fight disease. This is what I would consider a wonder drug for plants. We have this in every blended fertilizer we make, and it's in almost all the soils that we make as well. Again, over 70 trace elements, and it's going to help fight disease. Do you use much kelp in your garden now? I know you use some yourself. Do you use any?
To eat.
Okay, to eat. Now, a lot of Asians actually have a lot of seaweed in their diet, and seaweed is actually very high in iodine. So if people have conditions with thyroid, seaweed is very, very healthy for us. Now, this is a little bit of a stretch, but this is how I look at the chemical world versus the natural world, and I can relate it to the American diet. We know that if we have a hamburger, fries, soda, and a candy bar every day, and that's our diet, it's going to fatten up the crop, right? I'm the crop, it's going to fatten me up. We also have less of an ability to fight illness when we have that type of a diet. When we look at the natural world of whether it's in the fertilizer category or whether it's the food that we're eating, when we're eating more naturally based foods, things that are coming from the earth, things, the vegetable crops that we have, the fruit crops that we have. Yes, protein, if people, are eating protein. Of course, all of these things combined, when we have a healthy, balanced diet, we don't fatten up as much, and we have a much stronger ability to fight illness. I look at it the same way in the plant world. My background is in chemicals. That is what I studied for years, but when I started using natural products, all of my organic chemistry classes and my soil classes all made sense to me because it really was working in a different system than working with the chemicals. So again, kelp is a wonder drug for plants as well as for people. This is of course, not in this format. Now, let me share with you on the lawn fertilizer, and then I'll go into some of the soils that we have. I was telling you a little bit about this lawn fertilizer. Now, we're one of the few products that you will ever see this written on. Controls thatch buildup. What is thatch? Thatch is nothing more than dead and decomposing organic matter, which is typically just below the grass and just above the root zone. Okay? And what eats organic matter? Microorganisms. So this is infused with the beneficial microorganisms. It's also infused with the endomycorrhiza, which is what turf likes, which is what grasses like. You don't have to have much more than this in nitrogen. Most of the fertilizers that you see today that are chemically oriented are 2 to 3 times that high. And it's just not necessary. If you really want to build the microbial life in the soil, using something that's natural, that's infused with the microbes and the mycorrhiza is really the way to go. I was telling you this is one of the #1 selling fertilizers around the lake. It also is available in a 40-pound size, so for those of you that have larger yards, this is one that I would recommend. You don't have our new pelletized fertilizer. I just want to tell you about that one. Do you know if you have that one? It's in the plastic tub. So I want to just tell you about. We have a new homogenized pellet, which is similar to the lawn fertilizer. It's called Dr. Earth Life, and it's a 555 NPK. All of the Dr. Earth has humic acids in it. Humic acids are the end byproduct of the whole composting process. But what we're using is an ingredient called leonardite. It's like a biostimulant in the soil. Humic acids are a biostimulant for the soil. I think you're out. Okay. So all of these are more of a powdery. I'm going to open one of these. These are more of a powder. And the homogenized pellet, I'll pass this around, but you can see that you can actually see the dust already, even from this. This is really more of a powdered form. The homogenized pellet, what's nice about that is you can broadcast it. So for those of you, I'll pass this around. You've already seen it because you use it. The homogenized pellet is nice because you can put it in a whirlybird and just broadcast it. Top dress your garden, especially if you already have mulch down. You can't really get in there and cultivate that in as easily. The more contact an organic fertilizer has with the soil, the better it's going to activate. But the pellets, if you throw them on top of the soil, and all you want to do is make sure you water well. There's no binding agent to hold it together. It's only through compression. Okay, so that's new for us. It's in a 5-pound container, 25-pound bag, and a 40-pound bag. So for those of you that have a large yard, we do have all of these products are available in larger sizes. Now Kellogg's, these products back here, these three have actually been around for about 83 years. That's a brand that we've had for years and years, and this is really the company that we built our name on. And then Gardner and Bloom is a brand that Kellogg's bought about 7 or 8 years ago. So let me just start with Topper. So Kellogg's is a composting company. That's what we do. We've been in the business, like I said, for 83 years. They're in their 3rd generation. And what we do is we compost. We have these huge, huge windrows. And we have these machines that take the pile from the center of the pile where it's hot. In the summertime, we have to have people on our facility because one of our facilities burned down in the 50s because the compost piles get so hot that it ignited and it burned our facility down to the ground. So we actually have to have people on site during the hottest time of the year to minimize that type of a problem. But these scarab machines, these huge machines, come and they have these tines that go in the center of the pile. They take the pile and they turn the pile so that all the hot material that's in the center now comes out to the outside of the pile. And so that cools the pile down. As the pile cools down and then the center starts to heat up again, now all of the beneficial living organisms start to grow again. Okay? So all the Kellogg products, Topper is the product that we use for any seed cover. So if you're preparing an area for a lawn, the composted material that we have in there is a very fine particle size, so it's really the right texture for creating an area for a lawn, whether you're doing sod or whether you're creating a new area with seed. And you would just use this as a top dress. We also have the beneficial endo and ectomycorrhiza in that one. Now the amend, Kellogg's was one of the first companies to use rice hulls. And we would buy all the rice hulls that we could get from the Sacramento Valley. And Grandpa Kellogg, he would go there in the 70s and they would say, why would you want this material? We just burn it. Why would you want this material? That's what they did in the 70s. They burned sawdust and they burned all these raw materials that today are, people want, especially in our industry. So the reason that this product was so good was it lightened our mixes. But the extra added benefit that we had beyond that was that a rice hull is a lignin. It's a very fibrous material. And they last in the soil system for up to 10 years. And so all the microbes, all the microbial activity that's happening in the soil, all the weathering that's happening in the soil would not break down these rice hulls. And what we realized was not only did it lighten up the soil, but it created these wedges within the clay particles of soil that allowed more oxygen to be in the soil. It meant that water percolated through the soil easier, roots could travel through the soil easier, and they lasted for up to 10 years. So this is essentially a coarser mix than Topper is. It's a coarser mix, and it also has a lot of rice hulls in it. So if you have a hard pan clay soil, this is a fantastic product for that.
Okay. You just till it in?
You can till it in, or you can use it as a top dress. If your garden is already established, you can just use it as a top dressing or just amend it into the soil.
And then somehow it works its way down.
It works its way into the soil, yeah. Any mulch that you're putting down on the top of the soil, really that's one of the most important things you can do. It's like creating an artificial forest floor in your garden. You're protecting all the living organisms underneath the soil system. As it's hot, it's protecting it and keeping it cool in the summertime, warm in the wintertime. It just is a blanket that allows all those living organisms that are within the soil to survive and thrive. And also earthworms, there are different types. Some earthworms travel up to the top of the soil, grab organic matter and bring it down, and others that travel sideways. So you're really getting the organic matter working its way down into the soil. So mulching's vitally important, even if you just do it once a year. To do a top dressing of some organic matter over the top of the soil is very, very important. Whenever you do that, take the opportunity to put fertilizer down first. Always take that opportunity to get your fertilizer as close to the soil as possible, then put your top dressing over the top of that. Okay. Now, grow mulch is the coarsest mix. This is a composted material, biologically active compost, and we blend it with bark. Okay. So this is really considered an all-purpose. You can use this in any type of soil, whether it's sand, silt, or clay. This one is better for a clay soil. Okay. And then Patio Plus. Have any of you tried the Patio Plus yet? Oh, you will love this one. This is probably, we've had this soil for, I would say, maybe 3.5 years. This is a fantastic, it's an outdoor potting soil. And I see you nodding your head, so have you used it? This will give you so many earthworms in your garden. It's incredible. It comes in a 3 cubic foot bale that you can see in the back. And this has a whole assortment of organic ingredients in it. So it has, of course, we have a nice hole in the side of it now. Composted forest products, Canadian peat moss, composted chicken manure, rice hulls. Again, rice hulls make a soil very fluffy. Horticultural sand, that gives some nice drainage. Perlite, also good for drainage. Now, our nutrient cocktail in here is bat guano, kelp meal, and worm castings. Okay, bat guano is fairly high in nitrogen. It's about 10% nitrogen, and it goes into solution very quickly. So it really gives plants a nice, gentle burst of growth very, very quickly. So this is a great product, again, for container mixes or for in the ground. You can amend like flowering beds or vegetable gardens. Yes.
I'm a newcomer to this soil here, and I lived in California for 14 years, but that was more of a clay soil. This soil is not necessarily clay, it's different. I'm way out in snow. But what my question is normally when you do a bed, obviously for like roses it's one thing, but if you're doing a regular flower bed, how deep are you recommending to go down with any of these amendments?
You know, I would go as deep as you can, 6 to 8 inches, a foot, if you can go down that far, but for sure the top 6 to 8 inches. Is that how you guys are doing it? Any of you that are gardeners?
You don't go any deeper than that?
If you can, but I would say that first foot is the most important.
Okay.
And then the top 6 to 8 inches is really the most important.
And then do you always mix with the native soil a little bit?
Yes.
Which is
you know, a lot of times people will have a really poor soil, a hard pan clay soil. And they will want to take an area and get rid of that. It's one of the worst things you can do. You want to just amend that soil. Why, after 6 months of adding compost to the soil, are we back down to the mineral base of the soil, whether it's sand, silt, or clay? Because of all the microorganisms. That's their diet. That's their food source. So in a sandy soil, organic matter goes away a lot faster. I would imagine it goes away very fast here as well because of the heat. Very fast.
Did you say Smith Avenue?
Yes.
You got hard, just plain old hard pan.
Yeah.
I know, but I mean, I grew a lot of things in tubs this year because I put in shrubs and I took the tubs and I did all these vegetables and everything, and it worked out really great. But I mixed a lot of the soil in with these things.
A lot of the native soil.
Uh-huh.
That is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
It really is a good thing to do.
It worked great. Everything was flourishing.
Because oftentimes these types of mixes, I mean, they do work fine as a standalone in a container, but when you have the native soil in there, it is going to be heavy, slightly heavier, and it's going to hold the moisture better. So that's actually a good way to go. And sometimes when you have terrible soil, putting it into raised beds is really a great way to go. So if you haven't tried this one yet, I would highly recommend it. It's a lovely texture to work with. It's a great value, being that it's in the 3 cubic foot bale. And like I said, this has become one of our #1 selling products in the Kellogg line. I'll start with this one here, worm castings. Worm castings are amazing. They have an amazing nutrient capacity. Now the NPK is extremely low. It might be 0.5, maybe 0.5, 0.2, maybe 0.3. Very low. But so it has primary nutrients. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the 3 numbers that we talked about, the NPK. Those are considered primary nutrients. Then we have secondary nutrients, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur, and then we have all the trace elements. We need a combination of all of those, okay? Now this has an NPK, which is fairly low, and it also has all the trace elements. The beauty of using worm casting is that it goes into solution very easily, which means that the plant can take the nutrient up very efficiently. Okay, worm castings are fantastic in the garden. We also add kelp into this. So this would be something, let's say you have a lot of houseplants, and a couple times a year I take all my coffee grounds and I'll tap I have a little a filter that is reusable, and I just tap the coffee grounds in a little tin, and once a week or so I'll stir it so that it dries out, and I take all those coffee grounds and I'll spread them around my plants, whether they're house plants or whether it's outside. At the same time that I'm doing that, I'll take a handful or two of worm castings, and I'll just fluff that right into the top part of the soil, and then I typically take my house plants out about once a month, and I wash them down and I let the water run through the pots. So you can do that with your house plants. You can do that with any of your plants out in the garden. If you have a plant that's really stressed and you just want to get some good organic matter back into the soil, this is ideal for that. We're starting to hear more and more about people talking about worm casting minimizing insect problems. Again, if you think about using good compost, organic fertilizers, things like worm castings, you are producing a plant with a thick cell wall. When you produce plants like that, you have less insect and disease problems. That's really the kind of the nuts and bolts of using natural products. So this is an outstanding product. We have a couple of potting soils. I showed you the Patio Plus. Again, that's an outdoor potting soil. This is an indoor potting soil. It comes in a 1 cube and a 2 cube. Again, all-purpose potting soil, okay? Just to tell you what the ingredient listing is in here, fir bark, tiny particles of fir bark, and then we use the worm castings, and the worm castings actually coat the fir bark, and that helps hold moisture. Forest humus, peat moss, perlite. Again, perlite's always going to be for drainage. Our nutrient cocktail in a lot of our soils is chicken manure, worm castings, bat guano, kelp meal, alfalfa meal, oyster shell, and dolomite lime. Okay, so again, indoor and outdoor, 1 cube and 2 cube. This product's been around for about, maybe 16 years. This one is fairly new. This is a specialty product. This is one of your favorites, isn't it? Yeah. This is a really nice texture. This is a little bit more of a peat-based mix. The other one has a little more wood in it. And this also has the endo and ectomycorrhiza in it. So it's a 1.5 cubic foot, so it's a specialty mix. And I think you've brought in a truckload of this for the beginning of the year.
Yes.
So this is going to be one of the hot products that you'll see throughout the rest of this year and into the new year. If you want to try, it's your number one. Okay. This product, actually, we developed this product over the course of about 2 years. So a lot of thought went into it. It's a more expensive mix, so you're going to pay a little bit more for it, but it's absolutely worth it. Potting soils, what I have found with potting soils is they're very emotional products because you're putting your hands in them. And so when people find a potting soil that really works for them, they typically stick with that potting soil. So I think you'll find that this will be one that you guys will really like. Let's see, what else? This is our plethora of poop, is what I like to call it. Our farmyard blend, all-purpose composted manure. And this it's derived from dairy, steer, chicken, poultry waste, and forest humus, and also rice hulls. So for those of you that want something that has more nutrient capacity in it than just straight chicken manure, that's what this would be. Really, and it's a step up from steer. 20 years ago, steer manure was actually a good manure. Why? Because the animals were more free range. Today, they're oftentimes more confined. Their diet is more limited. They don't have a lot of the same natural grasses that they were eating. So today, steer manure, it's better than nothing, but the problem is it's high in salts. The reason people oftentimes use steer manure is because it's a good value. It's inexpensive. But there are other products that are far superior to that. We don't need to add more salt into the garden. So this would be something that I would recommend as a step up from steer manure. We carry steer manure because people want a product like that, but I would actually recommend using something like this, the farmyard blend. Now, this is our Azalea Camellia rhodii, and this is a fairly basic mix. You can plant directly into this. This has fir bark, forest humus. When you see forest humus, That's a composted blend of wood byproducts, of assorted wood byproducts. Peat moss, worm castings, and sand. It's a very basic mix, but you can actually plant directly into this mix. So in a container, this would be fine in a container, and it's also great for in the ground. Now I would bet the pH here is very high.
And it drains very well.
And this, yeah, so you've used this one as well. Now where are you from in California?
Southern.
I recognize you. What, did you work at a nursery or in a garden center? Okay, you seem familiar to me too. So this is just great for anything that is an acid-loving plant, which in the soils that we have here, this would really work well for anything that you're wanting to amend the garden with, okay? Bedding plants, any shade-loving plants, anything in a container or in the ground.
When you use that manure, do you have to be very careful about it burning?
You know what? Because it's composted, it's not going to be as bad. No, I mean this is not. It's not as hot as you might think because it's been composted. Now this is one of my favorite products for mulching. This is what I consider a 3-in-1 product. You can use it as a planting mix or an amendment. You can use it as a seed cover, or for preparing a lawn area, or for sod if you want to lay sod down. You have a couple choices. You have topper. You also have this one. So if you want to cover wildflower seeds or cover the top of your lawn, or if you want to use this as a mulch. This is my favorite mulch because it's coarse. It lasts a lot longer than some of the other composted materials because it's slightly coarse. It also has a little bit of redwood in it, and redwood lasts about 5 years in the soil. It also has the mycorrhiza, as you can see. And it tells you right on the front, it's great for planting and as an amendment, as a seed cover, or as a mulch. So it's a 3-in-1, and it's really another product that's a great value.
So of all of those, what would you recommend for clay soil?
For clay soil, I would recommend either this one or Amend. Yeah, either one of these. And I'm almost finished. I want to just share this last product just to get, some of you may be familiar with it. Grow Power's been around, I want to say, since about the 50s. Now this is considered a bridge product, which means it's part organic, it's part synthetic. It's sort of the best of both worlds. It gives you the kick start of a chemical, but with the benefits of an organic fertilizer. This product's actually spec'd into a lot of different landscape architects spec this into their job sites. So if you look at kind of a good, better, best thing, I would recommend Grow Power over any chemical fertilizer that people would use in the garden. It is absolutely far superior, and the reason is it's enriched with humic acids. It also has leonardite in it, which is the humic acids portion of it. Humic acids act as a sponge in the soil, and they'll literally soak up any toxic portions of any nutrients that you may put into the soil system. And they also, so it acts as a sponge to absorb toxic materials, and it also acts as a sponge to hold nutrients and release them back to the soil when the plant needs it. So Grow Power is outstanding. It's a little bit less expensive than Dr. Earth. Dr. Earth, so this would be a product that I would say, we have a lot of people that blend the two together, that blend Dr. Earth and the Grow Power together, because then you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting all of the organic, all the microorganisms, all the mycorrhizal fungi, and you're getting a double dose of the humic acids. So this is a product that's, like I said, been around for a long time. It's called Grow Power Plus, and the Plus has a soil penetrant. So for the hard pan clay soils, this allows the nutrients to go down into the soil much, much easier. So another product that's really ideal, the Dr. Earth is probably my favorite, I would say. Any of the starter fertilizer, the lawn fertilizer. And as we grow forward here, I'm sure as time goes on, we're going to be expanding what we carry here, because we have done a very good job here, and I think more and more people are interested in using some of these natural products. So let's see, just a couple more. Here's a couple of liquids. This one is a 333. It's a 333 NPK. It has trace elements and growth enhancers in it. And this was actually in the organic farming community for about 25 years before we brought it to the retail market. Think of this as your booster, okay? Think of this as an organic version of a Miracle Grow, if you will. Always use the Dr. Earth in the soil so that you can have the ingredients in there that diminish disease-causing pathogens, that help build good soil structure. And look at this as your booster. Anytime you use an organic fertilizer, liquid, make sure the lid's on tight and put it into solution. Each ingredient has a different density weight, so they settle out and you'll have this thick stuff on the bottom. So always put it into solution before you use it. You can use this in a watering can, in a hose end sprayer, as a foliar feed. It's just a dynamite product. Here's another product that is seaweed extract. And this is a 0.10.1.5. This is great as a soil drench or as a foliar feed. When you use kelp or seaweed extract as a foliar feed, you will help diminish powdery mildew on roses. You will also help diminish peach leaf curl on different kinds of fruit trees. Again, why? It's thickening the leaf surface. It's giving you all those trace elements. So this is another product. The way that I look at these products are tools that every gardener should have in their toolbox. It's not about just using one product. It's about finding what the right mix is for you. But seaweed extract is another ingredient that I would highly recommend into your program. And fish emulsion. Anybody use fish emulsion still? Nobody.
Oh, I've used it.
Do you still use it once in a while?
Not very much.
Not that much.
I used it on irises.
Okay. I would really recommend going back and using this, even if it's just once a month. Why? Because it builds the soil. It has all these trace elements. Once a month, if you included this into your program. Now this smells like Kahlua. I'm not really sure what he's brewing, but this actually has a good smell. We know what this smells like, right? Any fish emulsion. But again, we've gotten so far away from using these products, and they're really inexpensive. And they work.
And it stinks.
It does it's odoriferous. It does. It goes away, I'd say, in about 2 days. Is that about your experience? But it's worth it. What it does for the garden, it's really worth it. And then this one is our insect spray. This is made from cinnamon, clove, and rosemary. Those are all the active ingredients. And those actually smother the insects. And then it has wintergreen, it has mineral oil in it. It really smells like a salad dressing. It smells really good. It has garlic in it. Garlic acts as a repellent. And it also has molasses in it. Molasses is the sticker spreader. It's what makes it adhere to the foliage. And then we also put seaweed extract in it. When plants are attacked by insects, they go into decline. They're stressed. So the seaweed extract boosts the immunity of the plant, and all the essential oils smother and desiccate and kill the insects, and then the garlic acts as a repellent. Okay, hose end sprayer, also in a hand pump sprayer. I think this is an easier way to use it, but you can use this on a whole array of plants in your garden. And I think that is about it. Does anybody have any questions or?
How about a deer repellent?
Deer repellent. Do you have liquid fence?
We have liquid fence for deer and rabbit, but if you have a rabbit problem, the Dr. Earth.
The lawn fertilizer.
The lawn
Yeah.
fertilizer is wonderful because it has that fish in it.
Yes.
And rabbits will not. And you can put it around your plants because it's all organic. It's
Yeah.
not going to hurt anything.
The base
But yes, we
ingredient
have deer repellent.
of all of the Dr. Earth line is fish bone meal. Now, fish bone meal is a 3-18-0 NPK, so small amount of nitrogen for vegetative growth, but primarily for roots and flowers and fruit. But the fish does have a little bit of an odor. When you use this, you want to make sure you water well, and the odor goes away in about 2 days. But this is really, really good for the rabbit. For the deer, I would say the liquid fence is one of the best that
That's working
for
well.
deer.
Yeah.
This is working well for deer as well.